Welcome. This is the Midlife Rising podcast. Why is it still so hard to talk about menopause? Why are we whispering about something half the population will experience? Today, we're done with the silence. We're bringing this conversation out of the shadows and into the light where it belongs. Because when we treat menopause like a taboo, we make women feel ashamed for aging, for changing, and for being human. And that stops here. Today, we're not just having a conversation, we are starting a movement. One that says you're not invisible, you're not broken, and you are certainly not done. You're a woman over 40 who spent your life being the one who holds it all together. But now your body's changing and your soul is done pretending everything is fine. Welcome to Midlife Rising. We're your hosts, Sherry and Jen, twin sisters and modern medicine women, here to help you rewire your stress response, balance your hormones, and reclaim your feminine power. Every episode is a rebellion against the rules you never agreed to and a return to yourself. Join us where midlife isn't a crisis, it's a catalyst. Welcome back to the Midlife Rising podcast, and welcome if this is your first episode. If it is, head back to episode 1, because that conversation is really going to set you up and it really sets up the rest of the podcast and everything we're going to be talking about here. Okay, real talk. Jen, why is menopause still treated like some dirty little secret? I know. It's like we're all supposed to just suffer quietly, pretend it's not happening, while still crushing it at work, at home, and then, of course, looking ageless on top of it. I know, it's exhausting. And honestly, I think it's time that we drag this whole conversation out of the shadows, because menopause isn't like you said earlier in the intro, it's a normal human process that so many of us feel shame around. And we need space to talk about it. That's changing. Lots of people are starting to talk about it, but we also need to laugh about it, cry about it, all of that without judgment. Yeah. And without feeling like we're being labeled too old or being too emotional, especially at work, or like we're somehow less capable. And that narrative, I'm done with it. Me too. I think this is a good spot to talk about my girlfriends, my book club. We were just having a conversation like 2 days ago about menopause, and three of us were kind of talking about some symptoms. And the fourth friend of mine, she just kept trying to shut the conversation down. Like, it was so clear that she was so uncomfortable with talking about this personal stuff. And she kept saying, we kept bringing it up, and she kept saying, yeah, well, and she'd turn her face away and just kind of try to shut the conversation down and change the subject. And why do we feel that way? To me, like, that's what this whole podcast is about. That's what this episode is about. And that to me is part of a movement. It's kind of about reclaiming midlife, making menopause normal, making it visible, and making it more empowering. Absolutely. So to our listener, get ready, get some tea, get comfortable, and let's burn the rules together. Join us on this movement. Yeah. Okay. So where do we start, Jen? Okay. Well, let's talk about why it's so taboo in the first place. Yeah. And I think you actually have some research on this, right? Like, it's been taboo for a very long time. Like, this is part of the patriarchy, where it goes right back to periods being something that's uncomfortable, dirty. I think there's still some cultures where a man is not allowed to sit in the chair of a woman who is bleeding. I know, it's crazy to think about it, actually. So it's in the academic world, it's called hegemonic femininity. What that is hegemonic is just the norm.
That's basically what it is like the accepted societal norm is the easiest way to put it. So from thousands of years ago, this creation or concept of femininity has come about, which is women must be, not in every culture, thin, but in Western cultures, it's thin, beautiful, nurturing. What else?
Youthful.
Not just beautiful, but youthful and mothering. So we have this vision, and anything that is not that, so any woman who is not that doesn't fit the mold.
Right.
Which means during pregnancy, she doesn't fit the mold because she's different. There's something going on. Even like when we talk about breasts, like breasts are somehow we've come up with this idea that breasts are sexual. So then when we're breastfeeding, that's not appropriate. So because of this hegemonic femininity that tells us we have to be youthful and slim.
Okay, can we just stop for a second? Because that whole thing that you just said about breasts being something sexual and not like, I actually know people. I have one person in my mind who actually said this. Nope, I'm not breastfeeding. My breasts are for my husband. And I was like, what? Where did we get that idea?
For your baby's food? Yeah. So it came from patriarchy. So it's been around for thousands of years. And we have ingrained this into ourselves, basically. So what that means is like, so when you're pregnant, you don't fit the mold. So you're different and you get judged for that. And you have a whole different identity around that. Same with when you go through both pregnancy and menopause, you're leaky because you're sweating. Sometimes you're more heavily bleeding. You are you're becoming less youthful, maybe becoming less slim, depending on how you're aging. And you don't fit the mold anymore. You don't fit the norm.
Yeah.
So you get judged. So nobody wants to talk about that when they go through that, we don't want to say I'm in menopause because that creates shame because you don't fit the mold.
Right. You don't belong anymore.
So historically, nobody's talked about it.
Yeah. And when I think about belonging and how much, I'm actually surprised by how often that comes up. I sort of thought that was a thing among childless women, which is who I've worked with for the last couple of years, where we feel like we don't belong because we don't fit the mother mold. So, the 80% of the population in kind of in our age category are mothers. And so every time a conversation happens about somebody's kids or somebody's grandkids, we feel like I can't participate in that. So that we feel like we don't belong. We feel excluded. So I sort of thought that this whole concept of belonging was why women our age felt like they didn't belong. And yet the number of women who are mothers and talk about not feeling like they belong, they feel isolated, feel lonely, they feel like their friendship circles are changing. Like that has floored me because I thought it was just me. I thought it was just the childless women, and it's not.
No, it's all women that often feel, every one of us has felt isolated or like we don't belong in some case or another. Every person on this planet. And if you think about back to where that comes from, like think biblical times, because we come from a religious background. Women were, in fact, it doesn't even matter, but they talk about this in the Bible all the time. How women were shunned when they were menstruating, when they were bleeding, when they were leaky, when they didn't fit the mold.
Yep.
They had to isolate. They were sometimes shut in a room. They were seen as toxic in some cultures. Like, don't touch them. Like you said, don't sit on a chair. So all of that has created this shame around when our bodies don't fit the feminine ideal.
Yeah.
Which is anytime. Like it's even just when we're bleeding.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I think about the cultures and countries where feminine products are not readily available. And so those
Mhm.
girls have to stay home from school because they don't have a way of managing their periods. And so then that causes shame and isolation and, oh, everybody knows why I'm not at school, and they are isolated. They're not,
Yeah.
they're separated just
Yeah.
because they don't have products available to them, but that still makes them feel that way.
Of course. And then they're also on the back foot because now they've missed 3 or 4 days of school.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or, if we were to miss work, because work just goes on in the male format of like you have to be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and there's no cycle in workplaces. So if you were to miss work because of that, you're also on the back foot. You're
Yeah.
behind
And
and you're judged for it.
and okay, so let's talk about that because that was flooding. So the really, really heavy periods that some women get in menopause. I did not know that that was a thing. I didn't know that was a symptom. Leading up to it, before I really started having perimenopause symptoms, I remember going to an outdoor event. Like we were bussed out to the forest for this was called Feast in the Forest, and musicians and stuff like that there. So, but it's in the forest. And my poor friend, she she's a little bit older than me. She was going through perimenopause and she was getting these episodes of flooding. And I'd never heard of this before. And thank goodness she talked about it because suddenly I became very aware that it wasn't just her. Other
Right.
people open up when you start talking about something. And we're out in the middle of the forest where there's like no proper bathrooms, they're outhouses. And she's talking about how she's so worried that something is going to happen, that she's going to have an episode, and because she's on her period and she doesn't know if it's going to be an okay one or is it
Right.
going to be a bad one. So imagine,
Yeah.
going through that out in the forest, but then also at work. I know women who have, well, you talked about this too, women who have bled through their clothes.
Mm-hmm. And then what do you do? I've been reading up on menopause and work in the academic literature, and there's plenty of studies that talk about how it's so uncomfortable for women. They can't talk about it. They don't want to talk about it with their boss, and they don't even want to talk about it with their friends. Not just this, but so they're hiding it. Like they get black chair covers if they are in light. If they have light furniture at work, they wear dark clothing. Sometimes they're in uniforms that are light, and they don't know what to do about it because they don't want to go to work in a light colored uniform. So there's all this stuff that nobody. Yes, it's becoming more out in the open, but that's not what the scientific research is showing, is that women still don't feel like they were capable,
I don't
or
think
not
so.
capable, like they're able to talk about it.
Not the really hard stuff.
Yeah, no, exactly. And to go back to where it comes from, for us, it started in childhood because nobody in our family talked about what was, like, mom told us what was going to happen when we turned 13 or so. But then it was like, we always had to hide it. There was all this shame around it. Mom never talked about it. It wasn't like, it was embarrassing.
Well, and let's back up there for a second because we didn't talk about it. But you and I felt a lot of shame around it and felt like we needed to hide it. And yet mom, like, she never honored any kind of privacy that we wanted around it. Okay, so the bathroom situation at our house for you and I and younger sister Di,
Yeah.
and mom all sharing one bathroom. And to sort of get around that, we had, the back part of the bathroom, which was where the toilet was, and the front, where there was a door in between that and the front part of the bathroom where the sinks were. And so we weren't like, if you locked the front door, then mom would go knocking on it because she wanted in to get to the sink, and she would just come right in. And then you're walking out from the toilet area with your garbage to put it underneath the sink where the garbage can was. And so then everybody in the household knows, oh, you're on your period. And I felt like I don't even know where that came from. Like, I feel like that was more me.
It came. Well, but it was still learned because mom always whispered about it.
Oh, yeah.
She would, so Cher, think about it. She'd sort of whisper to us like, you can use a thinner pad because it's cheaper. When you're towards the end, or it was always this whispered conversation, and whispering and silence breeds shame.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I walked into a friend's bathroom the other day that her what a 15, 16-year-old daughter uses. Okay, first of all, it was chaos. It was quite funny. But right on the back of the toilet is all the tampons and pads. And I was like, that was not the case for us. It was hidden away in a closet. We had to, it was hidden away. And that could be a sign of the times, or that could be a sign of that family. I don't know. I do think it's a sign of the times a little bit, in that all of these things about a woman's body are getting out in the open, but at the same time are still taboo in many situations.
Well, and I kind of feel like young women, when they are first starting to get their period, they are definitely becoming much more open about it. And I do think things are changing from that perspective. But when it comes to menopause, we're kind of the first generation that's now trying to open things up. Like our parents' generation, our mothers, this was not discussed. They might joke about hot flashes. Maybe they joke about memory. Like, oh yeah, I just put the keys in the refrigerator. I've never said that in my life. It's always been the fridge. But that they joke about those things, but they would mom never talked about the hard stuff, how it feels to be going through this, or the grief that women feel when their kids leave the house, when their first kid leaves the house, that feeling of, oh my gosh, I don't need to mother this child anymore. This is an adult who is going off on their own. They're flying the coop. There's grief with that. There's grief with, our bodies changing and identities changing, and maybe lamenting my 20-year-old self and the way that I used to be, or the fun I used to have, or the life I used to live. People don't talk about the hard stuff.
No.
Or the more embarrassing symptoms, like the flooding.
Yeah, the hot and the symptoms that might or might not be felt by everyone. Hot flashes are now normalized, even though we talked about this in the last episode, that they're normalized in our culture. It's sort of expected that you get them, but they're not that normal. But because of that, people feel more free to talk about that because it's expected that you're going to feel hot flashes. The other stuff, all the other symptoms.
No, they don't talk about. But the other thing is, they don't talk about, it's really just our generation that's starting to talk about, hot flashes actually really suck.
Yeah.
It's so disruptive for your sleep if you have night sweats. I used to wake up. There was a short period of time before I figured out my hormones where I was getting night sweats. And it was a couple times a night, sometimes 3 times a night, I would wake up in a complete drenching sweat. Change the pajamas. I would have changed the sheets if Mike weren't sleeping on them.
Yep.
But put a towel down because they're wet now.
Yep.
And no one talks about that. They were just joking about, oh, I'm having a hot flash.
Yeah.
Open up the fridge. Let me in there. Like that sort of thing. But not the like how disruptive night sweats can be. Or, I mean, you've done the research on the hot flashes at work. Like talk about that.
Yeah. Well, women, they'll put fans, like they do whatever they can. They'll put fans up. It depends if they have temperature control over their work environment. But they're suffering. And actually, it was on Michelle Obama's podcast that she talked about this. And she said one time, I might get it a little bit wrong, but one time they were dressed up in like ball gown. She was in a ball gown and they were about to go on a stage and she got a hot flash and her hot flashes apparently drenched her.
Mm.
And she was standing there ready to go on with her husband to this function and totally drenched in sweat. I never got them that bad, where I'd had to change my clothes other than the night sweats. But women don't talk about how bad they can be.
Yeah.
So her podcast, I felt, was helping to get that out in the open. So, yeah, like we joke about them, but we don't actually talk about it seriously. It's still a big taboo and we don't talk about the other stuff.
Yeah.
Like when you're talking about grief, and that's because we don't talk about the grief because grief is reserved for people who have lost a loved one, which is a whole other conversation. But I felt like as much as I never embraced getting a period, but then when they were gone, I was like, I kind of want them back.
Yeah.
I want to feel, because that made me like, because now probably something deeper was that I felt like my fertility was gone. And now like, this is really, it felt like the end of something.
I think you and I were talking about why it's taboo and why, like earlier before we started the show, we were talking about why are we afraid to talk about this? Why is my friend, like I think we've talked a little bit about generationally or, you know, how we've grown up where this topic has been taboo. So it's hard to break that. But I don't think we really talked about what's actually going on. And you sort of alluded to it. You talked about there being shame around topics that aren't discussed, like topics that are whispered about, or where there's silence around those, there's usually shame. But why? Let's come back around to like, why is there shame in the first place? Why do we still feel it? And what happens if we just start talking about it?
Right. And that's fear of judgment. So the research shows that most women are afraid to divulge all of the especially at work, the cognitive symptoms. So they don't want to divulge any symptoms because then people know they're in menopause. Part of that is the foggy brain. I got to read sentences 3 times over. I'm not as productive. My memory's going. So cognitively, there are cognitive changes, whether it's perception or not.
Well, are they changes or are they
symptoms?
Yeah, like I think those are symptoms because they seem to go away or can.
Yeah, I think there are more symptoms, but I'd have to check. I'd have to look at the medical research. Like I'm looking at work, like management research. So, but yes, like part of my foggy brain was I was so freaking exhausted because I was losing 2 hours of sleep every night.
That too, yeah.
So I was so tired and then I couldn't focus. And then, of course, you can't focus because then if you have hot flashes, like if you have 5 or 6 hot flashes during the workday, that it's completely distracting. And then you have to try to get back into your work after.
Yeah.
If it wasn't like completely drenching you and you have to go home and change your clothes or something. So there's a fear of the judgment that shows up in many women at work, especially they fear even female bosses.
Yeah. Like a female who has a female boss is still afraid to tell her female boss.
Yes, exactly. And they're even afraid to tell other colleagues who are also menopausal women.
Yeah.
That has also shown up in the research. So there's this huge fear of judgment. And it also comes down to, like, at work, trying to manage your professional identity. Like, we have an identity at work, right? And many of the people that come into our world are high performers.
Mm-hmm.
They're known as the go-to people. They're known as high performers. They hit their numbers. They do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly all this stuff is like, you're not able to function at that level anymore. And they fear that judgment. Like, that's going to be weird.
Yeah.
I don't have that identity anymore.
I was looking at this funny post about, when did the Golden Girls come out? Was that like the 90s?
The 80s.
80s? The Golden Girls, the not the older lady, the mother, but the three, like Blanche and Rose and what's the other lady's name?
I can't remember.
Anyway, the three of them. They were at the time in their mid-50s. And when you look, so this post showed like a picture of them, gray hair and wearing kind of frumpy-ish clothes, and the way that they're portrayed, like Rose is so ditzy, and like they're just, the way that they're portrayed is so different than they showed a picture of today's 55-year-old woman, professional, like professionally dressed, dark, like dyed hair, not gray hair. It was totally different. And I was like, wow, like the way that I think we still view when we hear somebody's like in their 50s or getting close to 60, we still think of the Golden Girls. So as soon as you say you're menopausal,
I absolutely do. And I'm in my 50s.
I know. When I think about grandma, even when she was in her 50s, like people didn't dye their hair back then. Younger people did, but like our grandma didn't. She looked like a grandma. She looked like someone that I now, like, I don't think of myself at that stage of life.
No.
And I think we still think like that. Like if you say to somebody, a menopausal woman, what vision comes to like what image comes to mind? They're going to think old and gray.
Yeah.
And so think about that, old and gray at work for a woman is like over the hill. Your career is winding down. You're not like viewed as a top performing leader anymore. You're like a grandmother.
Yeah. It's not just like that women perceive they're being judged. They might actually be.
Yeah.
Hence, we try to fit the mold, dye our hair, fight aging at all costs, do whatever we can to, we call it aging gracefully now, but it's what we're really trying to do is stop aging.
Oh, all of the media out there is fight the signs of aging. It's like it's a battle when it's a normal human process.
I know the word anti-aging is like completely like people back before patriarchy set in would have been like, what?
Yeah.
Because with like aging is a natural process. Why would we try to fight a natural process so vehemently?
Yeah. And why do we make it mean so much about us?
Yes.
I mean, we've talked about that, but like now there's the reality that if somebody knows you're going through menopause, if somebody knows how old you are at work or anywhere, that they might judge you. And yet, like the place that I go is now that I'm in a place where maybe it's because I'm not in the corporate world, so that judgment doesn't matter. But in my normal life, I'm like, who cares? Coming back to the personal aspects, like the more quote unquote embarrassing symptoms, the flooding or UTIs or yeast infections, all that stuff like ramps up. So somebody knows I have a yeast infection. What really is the big deal? Like I used to care. I used to go into, I don't really get yeast infections, but I get, like, I've had other situations where I've gone into the pharmacy and I'm like, it used to be that I didn't even want to buy tampons myself in the pharmacy, or like an ovulation kit, or anything, a pregnancy test, even like anything related to the female body, I felt uncomfortable going into a pharmacy, and I'd be looking around to see if there's any guys around. And now when I go in, or now when I think about this earlier version of myself, like, what's the worst that could happen if somebody knew that I was picking up a thing of monostat? Like, what? Okay, so they think, oh, she has a yeast infection. What am I making that mean about me? Like, I'm not going to die if somebody finds that out. I'm not going to, it actually does nothing to me.
Yes.
Other than the perception that somebody thinks that's gross, or somebody, whatever. You know what I mean?
I do. And at the same time, I know there are women listening to this who will be like, well, yes, you can say that. But if somebody knows, like coming back to the menopause stuff, if somebody knows that at work, I'm going to be judged. And it is a very real potential consequence.
Right. But
that they will be judged and be demoted or not get the promotion that they want or whatever. So, yes.
But getting away from the workplace.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that in the workplace. And what I'm seeing is, if we take a step back, how will we ever change it if we're not willing to show or talk about it, or like be open about it? How will we ever change that judgment? Like, that's the only way, but we can only dissipate shame, which is what judgment is like, I feel shamed because somebody's judging me. The only way to dissipate that is to talk about it. So if we don't talk about it, then it doesn't disappear. And if we do talk about it, then there's these risks. So what do you think is the way around that?
For starters, I agree. Talking about it and bringing everything that has been in the darkness to the light is one way to do it. And that's why we have this podcast, is so that we can bring this stuff to light and talk about stuff that I shouldn't say nobody else. There's lots of midlife podcasts out there, but that people aren't talking about, and also then to uncover the shame around it and the conditioning. So yes, agree. The only way to stop it is to create this movement that we're all going to start talking about it.
Well, and if we start talking about it, then we can start to dismantle, as I said earlier, when you start talking about it, then some of that shame starts to dissipate naturally. You bring anything out,
Yeah.
Mike is notorious for this. Whenever there's an elephant in the room, he lays it out on the table and then it disappears.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you talk about the elephant that's in the room.
Yeah.
It just dissipates.
So the only way to dissipate the shame, or the only way to change the way that the world approaches midlife women, is to start talking about it.
Yeah. I've always felt that whatever we want to see in the world, there's that saying, be the change you want to see in the world. But that there's actually, if you really think about that, we can't go around expecting the workplace to just change.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to initiate the conversation. Somebody has to find it within themselves to be like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm going to stand up for this, or I'm going to just start talking about it, because it's only awkward if you think it's awkward. It's only personal if you've decided that it's too personal. It's only embarrassing if you just start talking about it. I don't know. Maybe I've learned because of my miscarriages, because there's another topic. Some stuff is going on with a woman's body. A death occurs inside the woman's body. And that is something we don't talk about.
Or grieve.
Or allow people to grieve. There's that disenfranchised grief again. But what I found, the very first day, the day after I had my first miscarriage, I don't know why, what came over me. I missed the day that I had my miscarriage. And what went on at work while I was away was a complete reorganization and a massive layoff. And all this stuff happened while in that one day that I was gone. I worked for BlackBerry. This is going on, like, this was the kind of the first wave. And I got back to work the next day, and I was down in the cafeteria, and there was only one other guy down there, a colleague of mine. And he said to me, "Oh, Sherry, I'm so glad to see you. I thought that maybe you were let go yesterday." And I said, "Oh, no." And I don't know what possessed me. I said, "No, actually, I had a miscarriage." Like, what came over me? I don't know. Like, to say that for like the first person that I tell is this guy that I don't even know that well. And he looked at me, I still remember this moment, with so much compassion. And he said, "Oh, Sherry, I'm so sorry. My wife had one." And he told me the story. And I was like, that moment, it changed everything for me, because suddenly I was like, oh, when I talk about this, it's okay. Like, somebody responded with compassion and empathy. And actually, it's not just me that this has happened to, because I didn't know anybody at the time who had had a miscarriage before. So I didn't have anybody to talk to about it who would understand. And he suddenly was showing me, oh, my wife went through that too. So I was like, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
So that, like, from that point on, I found that it was only when I was awkward about it, when I was like, yeah, I don't have kids. I had like, I'm all awkward about it. Then they get awkward and they don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
But when I just came right out and blurted it out and said, yeah, this is what happened, he knew exactly what to say, and it wasn't awkward.
Right.
So that I think it's the courage has to come from within us. We can't expect the workplace or the world to change without us finding the courage to talk about this stuff in an open way.
I agree with you completely on that. As hard as it may feel,
Mm-hmm.
because the other thing that tends to happen is, like, just going back to the workplace, because that's my expertise, is it ends up, there's all these workplaces that are trying to put support in now for menopause, which it's the word is nascent, but it's that's an academic word. It's very new still, but it's ending up being a tick box exercise, and women aren't actually feeling supported. They're like, yeah, they put these things in and they give us a pamphlet on some of the symptoms and stuff like that, but it's not actually supportive. So I do think you're right in that the support and the compassion needs to come from within and needs to be a grassroots movement. Whether you're at work or outside of it, it still has to be, okay, I am going to start by talking about this. The thing, though, that you said that hit home for me is when you said, I don't know what possessed me to actually tell this man. And I think that's the problem with so many women, like with me at least. I couldn't get myself to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm starting to think about wrapping this up. That's where the work that we do comes in.
Yeah.
And that's helping women to find their voice and stand up for themselves, and to find that courage. Because I was that person who could never find that voice. I had a colleague, her name's Milena. I actually interviewed her on my other podcast, and she's now the MD of a huge company. And she was always this person who just said whatever came to her mind. And like, she actually tells this story on my other podcast, that she would, like, if she had a run in her nylons, she'd walk into the meeting and just acknowledge it. She'd be like, I know I've got to run in my nylons and there's nothing I can do about it. Rather than, as you said, like, keep the elephant at bay
Yeah.
She would just say it. And I always looked at her and went, I can't get myself to do that. You know, if I'd spilled on myself, I couldn't get myself to say it. So that's going to be the hard part for a lot of women, is to actually start talking about it.
Well, and that's where, okay, like you said, that's where the red tent comes in. And so much of the work we do under the red tent is self-worth work. Because whenever we're afraid to voice something,
Yeah.
that relates to, well, if if you're afraid to voice something, you're afraid of what people are going to think of you. Am I worthy? Like, am I likable? Are they still going to respect me after I say this? And we won't be able to start talking about these things openly until we do that inner work. It has to come from within.
Yeah.
And that's what we do under the red tent, is let's start with a safe space where women who are all in midlife can talk about it together first and realize, oh, this is okay. I'm not going to die. People are still going to like me. I am still worthy, even though I'm going through some stuff, whether it's menopause symptoms or other midlife, like maybe you're in your late 50s and you're through menopause, but you're feeling some other stuff, like those grief or the identity shifts. And there's so much that comes up in midlife. So let's create a safe place where we can just start talking about it together before we start tackling the workplaces and the world and the patriarchy and all the systemic issues with it.
Yeah. So we haven't talked about the red tent before. So to our listener, the Midlife Red Tent is a community of women over 40 that we have created, that where we help you and guide you through this transition so that you can rise in midlife instead of feeling like you're struggling, you're still over functioning, possibly burnt out and serving everybody else. And did you want to add to that, Sharm?
Well, I was just going to say, it's more than just a community. I mean, yes, we provide community under that red tent umbrella, but it's actually a guided transformation. It's, where you get to be initiated into midlife, into menopause. It's where you get to be proud of who you are and love your next chapter versus dreading it or thinking it's the beginning of the end or whatever. It's not just a community. It's where we guide your transformation.
Just talking about it gets me so excited. We had our first call yesterday, and which would be weeks probably before this episode is published, and it was just so, I don't know, it was just so exciting to see these women who were feeling more comfortable to talk about it and for us to show them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the first 24 hours, how to get an hour back every week.
Yeah.
Which is eventually going to be an hour back every day for just you. So yeah, I'm so excited about that program, and we'll put links in the show notes to it if our listeners are interested in it. And feels like a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Let's just summarize, like, what we've talked about today is we've talked about why it's so important to bring the midlife conversation to light. We've talked about where it comes from, the patriarchy, the societal conditioning, why it often feels so shameful, and really the first step or the big step in terms of what you need to do to start talking about it and to join our movement. And that is cultivate your self-worth so that you are willing to start talking about this no matter where you are and no matter who you're with, without feeling shame about it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways you could do that is by joining the Midlife Red Tent program with us.
Yes. And we will drop links into the show notes about how to find us and the Midlife Red Tent. And now can I wrap it up?
Yes.
Okay. So if you enjoyed this episode, if something in this touched something within you, sparked your curiosity, share it with another midlife woman. And follow us. Do whatever platform you're on. Subscribe, follow, rate, review. Those are the big ones that we really appreciate so much. We appreciate all of it. Rate and review us. That's how the word gets out. That's how we spread. And we would be forever grateful if you did that. And come back next week. We've got another amazing episode for you.
Okay. Bye for now.